this is going to be just basically an update to let you guys know what we've been working on the last sort of month or two on the parks accessibility project. So we're, the goal is to improve accessibility at Canada's national parks. This is the agenda. We'll do some introductions and an overview. Then we'll give an update on each of the sort of like sub projects that we're working on, and hopefully we'll have some time for discussion at the end. I think for the introductions, I think sort of me has the only person.
Actually, I think Jenny and Steve haven't been with us before, so it's possible they don't know everyone in the group either. I think maybe we can get them to introduce. Yeah.
Sure.
So maybe
I was at I have been at a previous meeting.
Sorry. Okay. Maybe I'm misremembering.
I don't think I have met everybody though, because I noticed a few new people that weren't at the first meeting maybe. But anyway, I'm Jenny and I'm a scientist at Toronto Rehab. And I focus on, my research focuses on sensory function and multi-sensory integration and how that facilitates mostly mobility, a little bit of communication as well.
Thanks, Jenny. It's been long enough that I feel like it's probably a good idea just to go around the room just so everyone remembers who everyone is. Why don't we go on? Steve?
Hey, everybody. Trying to decide what to say I do here. It sort of depends on the day, but I'm a staff scientist at Toronto Rehab, and I oversee all the workshops where we design and build whatever other scientists need to do their research, and occasionally we help commercialize some of that stuff. And I can help with human factors and ergonomic assessments and whatever is appropriate for the project.
And you drafted the first version of this proposal that I think got modified in subsequent applications. Yeah. Welcome, Kathy.
Okay, so I am a professor emerita in psychology, U of T, and I work with Jenny in the Challenging Environment Assessment Lab sometimes. And I am in BC now, and I'm a gerontology adjunct professor at Simon Fraser. So I do hearing and aging.
And Walter?
I'm the third one in the lineup of the people from the sensory cognitive aging gang with Jenny and Kathy. I'm the vision guy. I'm at the School of Optometry in Montreal. I'm a low vision therapist, and I work mostly with people that are deafblind. And I've been terribly silent in the last couple of weeks, mostly because I have a part-time role as a care provider for an older mother-in-law with dementia, and that blocks my Fridays. So that's why I haven't been part of the Friday adventure.
Thanks, Walter. We actually have decided to pause those meetings, and we decided to take a break from those meetings, and we're going to, I think, move ahead with meetings as needed as we kind of move forward. So yeah, you haven't missed much, actually. Thanks, Walter. Hossein.
I am with Mechanical Engineering Department at University of Alberta in Edmonton. My field of research, and then also potentially the way I can contribute to this project is outdoor health assessment and development of rehabilitative and assistive technology with a focus on wearable technologies.
Thank you. Cesar?
Hi everyone. I don't know if you can hear me. I'm on my mobile phone today, so this is a new adventure for me.
We hear you.
Okay, good. Hi, my name is Cesar Marquez Chen. I'm a scientist at the Kite Research Institute, Toronto Rehab. I'm also an assistant professor at the Institute of Biomedical Engineering now of the University of Toronto. I do research on neurorehabilitation, particularly focused on restoration of voluntary movement after stroke and spinal cord injury. In a previous life, I used to develop assistive devices, and I work clinically also with individuals with spinal injuries. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Mark?
So my name is Mark Weiler. I'm from Wilfrid Laurier University. I'm the librarian on the team.
Sorry, thank you, Neha.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Neha. I'm a new postdoctoral fellow who will be working with Dr. Datta. And so for my background, I'm a physical therapist from India, where I've done my bachelor's and master's. And then I've moved to Canada. I've completed my PhD in rehab sciences from McMaster University, where I've worked in the area of falls and secondary osteoporotic fracture prevention. And then I've done my first postdoc at Lakehead University, where I've worked in the area of work disability prevention. And now looking forward to work with Dr. Datta in Park Accessibility Project and Coast to Coast Project, and hopefully fall prevention project as well. And looking forward to work with all of you as well. Yeah.
Great, thank you. We'll go to Ziad.
Yeah, so hello everyone. My name is Ziad Ghulam. I'm a research assistant working in Professor Datta's lab, and I'm excited to share with you some of the updates we've been working on today.
Makas.
Hi everyone, I'm a research analyst in the Lux team as well. I'm working on some of the aspects of the projects with Ziad and the rest of the team as well. I'm working primarily on the website actually, so you'll get emails from me from time to time regarding the website.
And Allison.
Hi, I'm Allison. I'm also one of the research analysts on the team. My background is sort of like in policy, public policy development, and I did my master's focusing on quality controls of closed caption.
Thank you. Okay, if you go to the next slide. Oh, sorry, did we miss anybody? Anybody else on there that we missed? No. Okay, I think we got everybody. Yeah, so just to touch base, we can just zoom out, make sure we all remember what we're working on here. The overall objective is to make recommendations to improve accessibility of our national parks. And these recommendations are going to be provided to this new body that was created, Accessibility Standards Canada. It was created recently after the passing of the Accessible Canada Act that came into force, I think, in 2019. And this body, Accessible Standards Canada, is now in charge of creating a number of standards, new standards that will apply to all federally controlled spaces. The first one of these standards that will be created is the Outdoor Spaces Standard. And there has already been an Outdoor Spaces Technical Committee that's been struck. The good news is that I've been invited to be part of that. The bad news, I guess, is that the standard comes out before any of the results of this research before our project is done. So it's, some questions around the organization of this, how these things are all tied together. I suspect there's some political pressure to get this thing moving and to get some standards made quickly. And so that's what this technical committee is doing. But, I think it's been incredibly valuable to be on the committee and see how it's moving forward. It is very mobility focused. This is one of the things we noted early on, even in our proposal. We said a lot of these types of standards are very mobility focused. And unfortunately, that is where it is the current draft is very mobility focused, but there's time to edit it, and we'll keep pushing for more kind of sensory impairment related things. That's part of our job. And it will be open for public review at some point. So everyone will have a chance to provide feedback into that. If you go to the next slide, Allison. So at the core of this project, what these recommendations, the way we've tried to organize it is through this thing we're calling an accessibility matrix. And across the top, we've said this is, we're looking at accessibility through the lens of what it is people want to do when they go to a park. So what are the activities that you're trying to, that you might want to participate in? We list those across the top. Down the side, we look at people with different, not necessarily breaking it down by people, but different types of impairments that people may have. And a person might obviously have more than one. But we look at a given impairment. How does someone with a given impairment that wants to take part in a particular activity, what sort of barriers do they face, and what sort of facilitators, what sort of solutions can we offer to make a given activity more accessible? Next slide, please. So we feed into this accessibility matrix from a number of places. We're doing surveys and park visits. Allison's going to tell us more about that. We have a scoping review. Mark's leading the work on the traditional kind of academic component of that. As we started getting into this area, we realized that there's actually a lot of really rich information available on YouTube. People with lived experience describing their experiences in parks and things, and pointing out problems, discovering ways to work around these problems. Some of you may remember the conversation we had with Kevin and Dee, where they have their YouTube channel and talk about these issues. And so we thought there could be a way of kind of structuring a more kind of the same sort of rigorous search, but through YouTube videos. So Neha's going to tell us a little bit more about her plans in that regard. All of this work is going to happen with feedback from stakeholders. They're going to review what we're doing and hopefully provide suggestions and ask lots of questions and change and add to what we're learning. So these stakeholders obviously include people with disabilities, their families, their caregivers, people that manage parks, people that provide services and products to these people as well. What we've started to learn from this group, these diverse group of stakeholders, is many of them are very enthusiastic. They're very engaged in this area, in this work, and there's real opportunities to try to connect people and connect ideas and get people talking about this topic. And so we're trying to figure out ways of facilitating that as well through this project. And so one of the ways we do that is through the website. Lukas is going to tell us more about that later. And something I want to put on the radar for later, we won't talk about it at this meeting, but I think there's a real opportunity to pull this diverse group of stakeholders together in some type of a conference, maybe targeting next summer for that. So I should mention, as we go through this, we'll pause as we go through each of these subtopics. We're going to have different people speak to them, and maybe we'll take quick questions. If you have a burning question, we'll spend maybe a minute or two answering questions as we go through this from one topic to the next. Does that make sense to everyone? Any quick questions now before I pass it on to Ziad? You can also type things in the chat if you'd like, and we can, we can sort of respond to those when it feels appropriate, or we'll have some time at the end for discussion as well. So I'll pass it on to Ziad.
Awesome, thank you, Professor. I'll be talking about the accessibility matrix more in depth, and we'll do a walk through of it. So I'll share my screen and show you what we've been working on thus far. So earlier, Professor Dutta has shown you like a simpler matrix for the slide. But here, this is the in-depth matrix. And here we can see, as Professor Dota has talked about, the different activities listed at the top. So here we can see that under park activities and experiences, we have things like cycling, fishing, hiking, swimming. And if we move to the sides, we have also other categories such as the features. So we have some features like visitor center, swimming pool, grill, fire pits. And also we have another category called basic facilities. So it includes things like washrooms, change rooms, parking. So you get the idea. At the top we're listing not only activities but also basic facilities and features. On the side here we have a list of the different types of impairments. Now we're following the Canadian Canadian survey on disabilities that was conducted in 2012 by Stats Canada, and this is how they laid down their classification of impairments. So the four categories are physical, sensory, cognitive, and mental health. And here you can see the types of impairments that fall under each category, as well as specific impairments. Now, I wanted to do like a simulation of how this matrix would work. So let's assume that there's an individual who wants to participate in, say, let's maybe go to the activities column, maybe pick the interpretive and educational programs activity. So we have an individual who wants to participate in this activity. However, they have maybe low vision or blurred vision, right? So then, in order to use this tool, this matrix, what we do is that we go to this column. We go down and then we find the intersection with the seeing row, and then this intersection here, this is the cell that shows us the facilitators the solutions that would enable that specific individual to be able to participate in the interpretive and educational programs. So we have two solutions right here. One is the Opus Plus from Acoustic Guides. The other one is the Chest of Senses. Now, I'm sure now you're confused because these are new terminology, new words. So in order for us to document what these are and what these mean, we're creating a rolling list of solutions and assistive devices that goes hand in hand with this matrix. This list is right here. So this list, just to put it in context, this will eventually be documented in a report. But as for the time being, we are just documenting all of the solutions in a list format. So here, let me go to the top. Here we have this list, and the columns at the top include things like the picture, so that we can see some visuals of the solution, the source where we're getting the information from. So it can be actually a person or a website or a journal. We have also the type, so it's not limited to solutions. We're also looking at services and design considerations as well. The name, manufacturer, who makes it, and a description that accompanies each solution. As well as these two columns are important because they help us to locate where this solution would fit into the matrix. So one column is the improve accessibility for whom, so list the type of impairment, as well as the improves access to. So what types of activities does it help in improving the access for. So now I just wanted to, before we talked about the two solutions, the Opus Plus and the Chest of Senses, so let's maybe go over those and see how this list works. So maybe, let me go here. So this is the Opus Plus. This is a device that is, it improves access for people with a seeing impairment, and it's essentially a digital catalog which has over 500 hours of multilingual audio. So it's there, it helps those with seeing impairments to be able to have better access at things like tours, guides, and interpretive and educational programs, as we've seen for the Matrix. The other solution that we saw earlier is the Chest of Senses. So let's scroll to that. So you can see like there are lots, and we're doing mobility and sensory as well. We're trying to cover a lot of them as much as we can. Here we have Chest of Senses, which is a really unique solution because we came across this solution from a YouTube webinar that we watched from Europark. They had a webinar on accessibility based on Europe, and this Chest of Senses, it improves accessibility for those who have not only seeing impairments but hearing impairments as well, and it allows them, it gives individuals an opportunity to discover natural textures, sounds, smells, and it allows ultimately for them to draw connections between all of these different objects. So it breaks many barriers with this solution. And as we saw from the Matrix, it improves access for interpretive and educational programs as well as virtual tours. So those are just two of the solutions that we saw from the Matrix. Do you have any questions on the Matrix or on this list?
Jenny just asked if these are solutions that are things that we found in other parks, or are these things that we, they're proposed solutions?
Yeah, so actually, so for example, the Chest of Senses, they're using it in parks in Europe across different countries there. And most of them, we are getting them from YouTube or from online searches. So most of them are actually being used. Not all though, some of them can be prototypes. But from this list, the majority of them are, that are being implemented and are actually being used today. So, such as like Mobi mats and Mobi chairs, these are all used today. Yeah.
Okay, that's really helpful. Yep. So just so I understand correctly, so the matrix that you showed us at the beginning, that's one example of a park. So this matrix represents one national park, and you would have this mapped out for different parks, or is this just
it's for all parks? It's any park. Yeah. Okay. The idea is that we would create this collection of solutions that a given park, Parks Canada could reference and say, here's how we can make, we offer skiing and swimming, we offer swimming and fishing at our park. How can we make those activities more accessible? Here's a list of ways that we should be thinking about, is how we hope that Parks Canada would want to use this information.
Okay, I see. And then just a follow-up. Yep. So did you, other than looking at solutions that have been used in parks, have you also looked at like more broadly at other solutions that have not yet been implemented in parks, but are implemented in other places and that could be adapted for use within parks, or even apps and things like that?
Yeah, we're taking a look at apps actually. So one of them Allison has been in contact with All Trails, which is an app that helps out. You and I, if we go to trails, we can if we go on trails, we can have this app on, and then it will help us to navigate through the trails. And we've also had discussions about how we can implement possibly accessibility features into these apps. So we're looking at different apps. One of them is the Blind Square app. So we're still actively searching, and we will welcome any suggestions, or if you know of any other apps that help that are more targeted towards parks as well, feel free to share with us, and we will look into them and add them to the list as well.
But you're right, Jenny. We should be looking at it's a good question. It's a question for Mark, I guess. Really, is whether our search strategies are open to that question, right? Like, are we open to finding solutions that maybe have never been used in parks but could be adapted for use in parks? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how much we thought about that. It's a good thought that we should take away and think about carefully. Thanks, Jenny.
I'll give you an example that comes to mind while Jenny was talking about this. For example, you are not currently consulting organizations that provide services for these individuals, if I'm correct. And so I'm thinking, for example, in Quebec, there's something called Camp Massawippi. This is a summer camp by a lake, conducting all sorts of activities that you would also do in a public park. But they're all adapted for children with disabilities, whether they're deaf, blind, have CP, sailing while being in a wheelchair, for example. But they may not necessarily be reported in the context of a scientific paper because they're really a clinical service that is provided. And so I'm wondering whether that kind of information or service could find its way in, even though it's not a research project.
Absolutely. Yeah, we should. I mean, that should be one of the people we contact and get to know what they do. Absolutely.
Yeah, if you could put the camp's name in the chat, please, that'd be helpful, because we are as we learn about different organizations, we are reaching out to them to learn more about what they do and what we can learn from them.
Thank you. I think Kathy, you have a
Is Walter finished? Is Walter's hand still up? You're done? Okay. Yeah, so I guess it's a little bit the same and a little bit different than what Jenny was thinking of. So some people are going to have their personal equipment, and then the park is going to have some publicly available equipment. And then you have to deal with the interface. So I imagine this is somewhat true even for wheelchairs, that, there are a lot of models and makes, and there are certain issues with some of them. But it would definitely, I would say, be the case for people with hearing aids, that there are ways that they connect to environments. So if you go into a theater, they might give you an infrared system to use so you can, watch what's going on in the theater. There might be a loop, a lot of churches have loops. There might be FM, Bluetooth kind of devices. So I'm thinking some of the accessibility that I think would make sense. This company, Sonova, produces a lot of equipment that if I have one of those hearing aids and I know that this place has that system, then I can go and do an activity there. So
yeah, I think we have that.
How do we connect those? Where do you draw the line between making things that are kind of generally available to people versus systems that people can connect their personal devices to?
Yeah, I think we could, one of our recommendations could be that this technology exists and many public places use it. Maybe certain buildings in a park or certain spaces in parks should also have those available as well. That could be one of our recommendations.
So for example, one of the things that's come up a lot in my kind of hard of hearing circle recently is libraries in Vancouver getting loop systems. So when a person with a hearing loss wants to talk to the person at the library desk, especially during COVID where you can't lip read, you know, that they just have loops there, and they have like a portable loop that they can pull out. So that facilitates the conversation. So again, it's a solution that like a library would use, but you could use it at an information desk in a park. Anyway,
absolutely.
So
yeah.
I'm not sure you've discovered all of those, but
no,
there
not yet.
may be things you would like to discover. And I will also say, I think you've really gone leaps and bounds with this matrix and filling it in. So I'm really impressed how that's evolved. Really nice.
Yeah, it's always under evolvement. So, and you can see like some cells are empty and others are filled. So we keep on adding and changing things and adding to the list. So thank you for the suggestion, Kathy. And I see, Jennifer, you mentioned text-to-speech apps. So that's a definite thing that we will look into for sure, and add it to the list in Matrix, definitely.
All right, so our survey and data collection. So this is a slide from the original presentation, and it's kind of our overall timeline. So our plan has been to start collecting data this summer through till next summer, kind of at least a 12-month period, all the while kind of developing the matrix, doing the scoping review, and then conducting visits. We submitted our REB application at the end of June, so we're hoping to hear back soon, complete any revisions, and then start advertising the survey and collecting data in August. I think this timeline works really well because kind of the end of the summer, a lot of people will have like visited parks over the last couple of months, and those memories, you know, those will be fresh memories that they can comment and fill out the survey based on. So we have two surveys, one for individuals with disabilities, one for caregivers. The surveys kind of cover the entire life cycle of a trip, you know, from planning the trip, traveling to the park, facilitators and barriers to access while you're there, kind of participating in different activities, and then overall enjoyment. Our plan for advertising the survey is to utilize our own website, utilize all of the social media channels, as well as we've been building up a network of communicating with different organizations, nonprofits, kind of within the disability sphere and sort of outdoor recreation sphere. So we'll be contacting all of them. Hopefully they can share it as well through their different mailing lists and their own social media. And then putting up posters at local, national, and provincial parks. As well, all survey participants will have the option of letting us know if they would like to be contacted for a follow-up, more in-depth interview. So that's where we are with that. Mark?
Okay. Oops.
Just to throw in that when the time comes for the distribution of this to communities with specific disabilities, I will be able to help you because a lot of the sensory stuff we communicate through social media. So find me when that happens and I'll set you up.
Fantastic.
So Alice, maybe if you want to go to the next slide, I can start from there. So thanks. So for our scoping review, we are posing our research questions to two broad sources. One, our traditional academic sources, such as academic databases and grade literature. Our second and is emergent source, YouTube. Early on, we noticed that YouTube was very responsive to our research question as Tilak described. Next slide, please. Now this spreadsheet will show how we are translating our research questions into natural language concepts and then into machine codes. The first column at arrow 1, take a main concept such as front country recreation areas and divides it into parts such as beaches and picnic areas. If necessary, these are further divided into subcategories. And arrow 2 shows how we translate our search classification and vocabulary into machine language search strings. which can then be used in academic databases or to search for great literature on organizational websites. Now, to ensure comprehensiveness, the search classification and vocabulary was reviewed by librarians from the University of Alberta, Laurier, and McGill, who had national park experience or support relevant academic areas. As you will hear briefly or momentarily, the team is learning to pose our research question to YouTube in a structured and transparent way. I left the columns at arrow 3 blank here only because progress is still being made as Neha identifies YouTube's search syntax, which is not nearly as transparent as the academic databases. Now, speaking as an academic librarian with a PhD, I believe this YouTube part will make an innovative and much needed contribution to academic inquiry as a whole, as it's taking up a methodological question of how do we use the YouTube search engine to pose advanced academic questions in a systematic and transparent fashion. Next slide, please. For the academic search, that spreadsheet will construct a search string of this complexity, and that's probably about half the size of it. Next slide, please. In terms of next step, I will operationalize disabilities, those concepts using the columns from columns 1, 2, and 3 from the matrix that Zayad showed earlier. I'll then complete a peer review of electronic search strategies at PRESS, as it's called, template, and then I'll write and register this review protocol with the Open Science Framework website. And that's it for that as part of the half of the scoping review.
If there's no questions, we'll move on to the YouTube section.
Sure. So far, Mark discussed about how he'll be using academic literature to conduct this system, to conduct the scoping review. So I'll talk about how I'll be using YouTube videos to look for barriers and facilitators in the area of park accessibility. So there will be two types of videos which we will be using in this project. One will be the videos where people with disability, they'll be sharing their lived experiences for park accessibility. And another type of videos that we'll be using would be based on webinars or conference proceedings where speakers are talking about their experience with park accessibility. Next slide, please. So in the next few slides, I'll be presenting screenshots from few of these videos, which will give you an idea how we are going to extract information on barriers and facilitators for park accessibility. So in the screenshot over here, this person who is a wheelchair user went for camping in a provincial park, and he's describing how these routes and loose gravel, next slide, please, over here on the trail is actually making the roads on this trail very bumpy, and it's very difficult for wheelchair users to go on these trails then. Similarly, he's showing this fire pit, that it's difficult for wheelchair user to reach for this fire pit because it's underground and is not accessible. Next slide, please. Here again, the same person, he's discussing how these barricades on the trails is not leaving any space for the wheelchair users to pass by. So it gets difficult if they want to go on a trail. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's a screenshot where this lady who is a project manager for visitor services is having a talk with another lady who in this video described herself as disabled photographer. So here they're talking about some tactile maps and this talking pen. So these are meant for people who are blind or who have poor vision. They can actually use their braille on these tactile maps, and they can read about all the directions and ways around in the path. And these tactile maps come with this talking pen, and this pen is having an attachment where people can plug in their earphones or headphones, and while they tap this talking pen on these tactile maps, this pen will read all the directions and ways around in the park. And this talking pen actually read all the information about directions and paths in both Spanish as well as in English for them. Next slide, please. Thank you. So here we have taken some screenshots from a Europark webinar where speakers have talked about park accessibility in Europe. So on the right side here, a speaker from Spain, she talked about that they worked on a park accessibility project, and what solutions they came up with were Gillette, directional bar, and hand bikes are few things which they are now making it available for visitors with disability so that they can use it there free of cost. And this Gillette is a single-wheeled modified accessible wheelchair where this person on a wheelchair needs assistance with two other people. However, it can help any wheelchair user if they want to hike on a trail. Secondly, here a support bar. It's meant for people who are blind. So the blind person is in the middle and the person in the front and the back, they can assist this person to show all the directions and path around in the park. Now here is a person who is using this hand bike, which is assisting him to walk around on a trail. And here another speaker from Latvia, she talked about her experience while working on an accessibility project and what solutions they came up with. So here she discussed, like, there was a narrow wooden bridge. It was converted to a spacious broad walk with a protected bars on the side. And similarly, these water closets were also made accessible for any wheelchair users as part of this project. And she also talked about some other things such as tactile objects and tactile info stands, which are meant for people who are blind or those with poor vision. They can use their braille to find their ways around in the park. Next slide, please. So on this project, currently we are trying to find the best search strategy which we can use to identify the relevant videos. And as part of next step, we are looking forward to have a decision on specific inclusion exclusion criteria for these YouTube videos, and then to conduct data extraction, content analysis, and finally writing the manuscript draft. And I'm happy to answer any questions if someone is having. Thank you.
All right, if there's no questions, we'll move on to site visits and the accessibility assessment checklist. So as you guys may remember, originally our hope was sort of to ask survey participants to go to national parks as part of the survey process. But due to kind of research ethics and timelines and stuff, we've chosen to survey people who have already been to a national park as kind of on their own accord. And the research team are going to be visiting parks to conduct different types of data collection and analysis. We have received our permit from Parks Canada to be able to conduct research at national park locations. Everyone on the kind of direct research team is on the permit at the moment. We know that the permit, we need to print it off and bring it with us on these site visits. And we've been advised by Parks Canada to contact them in advance of any research visits. They've also informed us that any kind of COVID protocols that they've put in place, like pre-booking visiting times and things like that, also apply to us when we're conducting research. And we are in the process, kind of like the Matrix, it's a sort of ongoing development of an assessment tool to kind of assess accessibility at the location. So our thought is this will be kind of like an accessibility checklist. It's something that we can bring with us when we go to national and provincial park locations. And it'll help us sort of assess the existing and current facilitators and barriers to access that are there. Thus far, we've consulted with Europarks and the National Center on Accessibility in the US. Europarks were kind enough to send us their checklist that they are using to assess access. And then the National Center on Accessibility, they sort of shared with us kind of their history and how they've been using checklists and assessment and audit tools in the past. So we're right now kind of working through that iteration. I think we have an example for you. And our hope is as the technical standards document gets developed, this checklist will kind of mirror that and be used as a companion piece. So kind of following the same sort of structure and headings and content, someone would hopefully be able to use both the guideline document and this checklist and kind of use it together to assess like accessibility. So here's kind of just like a small section of the checklist currently. This is the section on trails. So it sort of asks a series of questions about what the trail looks like currently, the width of it, spacing, different terrain. There's a few data points in it currently. This is from Europarks. So we've kind of left that in there for now, but obviously as the technical committee solidifies what standards and guidelines they're going to be using, we would implement that metadata into the checklist itself.
And just one thing quick to add,
yeah.
If you can go back, Alison. This is one section which talks about trails. We have multiple sections, maybe 15 sections. And it will address different questions with a yes, no, or not available. And that in gray, it will that column in gray, it will have different specifications as well for every section.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're still very much in the development phase of this.
And we will be testing it ourselves as well once we go to the parks ourselves, just to stress test this and to see if it's effective or not, to pass it on to Parks Canada eventually.
All right. If there's no questions right now, we'll move on to the website.
Awesome. Thank you, Alison. So our website's been live for the last few months. I'd say since about mid-March or so. It's accessibleparkscanada.ca. We've been making a lot of different changes for it. This is one of the aims of our project, to have an accessible website where we can kind of put together all of our thoughts and then make them readily available for the general public and for people who are interested in accessibility at national parks, to be able to see what we're doing and what direction we're moving with the project as well. Next slide, please, Alison. So one of the main areas and one of the main sections that we've really been working on are blog posts. And so what we're doing is, our objective is really to explore all these various topics within accessibility in parks, as well as the outdoors and recreational spaces. And so some of the topics do include assistive devices, accessible services across North America, reading through some of the research that accessibility advocates out there have done on their own, and some of the lived experiences at various national parks as well. And some of our blog posts that you can see are listed on that last slide. So our next steps really, thank you, Alison. Next slide, please. So our next steps really to create like a rolling list of accessible devices, relevant companies, manufacturers, pricing. And the entire point of this is really to bring together different ideas and be able to make like meaningful connections for like consumers, as well as organizations as well, who are trying to get their accessible devices out there. And a good example of this is a device, a manufacturer we spoke to called Trail Rider. They're based out of BC. It's basically a single wheel all-terrain mobility device designed and built in BC, yet it's widely accepted and used in Australia and not as widely accepted and used in Canada itself. So we spoke to the organization as well, and they're trying to get their devices out in Canadian national parks as well. So our goal is kind of to put together this repository where people can come in, read more about these devices, and also try to expand those devices to other areas as well. We will be posting our surveys once our surveys are ready to go. We'll post them on the website as well, so that individuals who do need to complete the survey can access them straight through there. We will be posting some more information on the scoping review, a good idea of what the scoping review entails. And as mentioned earlier, most of you have sent me a headshot, but if you haven't sent me a headshot yet, please do so, and I'll add you into the website as well. And that should be about it. If there's any questions on the website or anything else, feel free to let us know right now. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so we're just going to open up the floor to questions or comments, discussions and stuff. We've got kind of a little over 10 minutes remaining.
So I just tweeted about the website.
Thank you.
Curious whether there is a mission among us in terms of visibility. I guess it's too early because we don't have that much to show yet, right? But let me know when you want to break into that kind of stuff. I'm a whore for publicity. So.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's a great offer. Thanks so much, Walter. We'll certainly. I think we're just gaining momentum. We've been bogged down a little bit with some of the, on this end. I won't bother you with the issues we've had with the funder, and HR at our organization has been a little bit challenging during COVID and things. So it's been slow getting going, but I feel like we're picking up steam. So we are moving forward, as I hope you can see. And all of the suggestions you're making, Wakas has been taking notes, and we're gonna follow up and keep making these sorts of connections. So if you think of anything, either at any time, really, you can send me a note or send any of us a note, and we'll follow up on all these connections.
We'll certainly let everyone know when the survey, when the REB proposal is approved and accepted, and we're ready to start collecting data, and the survey is live. We'll certainly let everyone know, and then that way we can all help sort of share that amongst our networks.
I have a question about the specific products that are listed in a couple of places, like in the Matrix and on the website. Are they part of what you imagine the recommendation would be, or are we using those to inform sort of a general kind of a recommendation?
I think it's just as a practical, the way we've been thinking about it is having this list of products that are already available provides people that run these parks, they can see what options are available to them to improve their accessibility. I think that's that's the goal, is to lay out, here are the options. Here's, here are different all-terrain wheelchair designs that are out there. Here are the rough costs that you could have. Here's a model, Trail Rider. I think they were even sharing with us, correct me if I'm wrong, what costs, like they have different models for buying versus renting and things like that they offer other customers. So Parks Canada might be interested in having some of these products on site, just like you go to a park and you can rent a canoe. Like you go to Algonquin, there's a vendor there that would provide a canoe. Would that be something we could do as well with something like a Trail Rider? That's one option. I think also there's taking these ideas and like, are there other options? Are there ideas that we can develop by stretching some of these existing ideas to do more? Is the other thing that this will help teach us.
And just on that, Steve, like the Trail Rider is a really good example where I spoke to the the chair of the association that builds the Trail Rider, which is BC Moss, and so he mentioned that they actually haven't spoken to many individuals at Parks Canada, so they don't really have those connections built. Whereas we might be able to actually bridge that gap between having a conversation between Trail Rider and Parks Canada. And now all of a sudden Parks Canada has it in their minds that, hey, this is an actual device that could be used at our parks, and we can help bridge that gap and maybe bring those devices into the parks as well.
So the Trail Rider, I guess, is an example, a specific commercial example of how to have increased mobility access to an uneven trail. So would the recommendation be have smooth trails that mobility devices can be on? And if you can't, then provide access to devices that would allow people to go on trails with routes. And as an example, there's this, or is it have trail riders at your park?
Yeah, good questions. I mean, so I guess what we're hoping our recommendations will say is that, and what Parks Canada, an organization like Parks Canada would accept, is that they want to be able to provide a menu of experiences to everyone that might come to the parks. And so, that includes people with kids and with strollers, as well as people who have sensory challenges, as well as people that use wheelchairs. And so, some wheelchair users might want more rugged experiences. Some might want a paved, almost a paved kind of accessible, flat, very, very non-challenging trail. Having this. So I think the idea is to make recommendations that demonstrate how a park can offer different levels of experiences that will meet the widest range of users' needs, so that everyone can enjoy everyone can enjoy all the activities that are available. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, and it sounds good. Yeah, yeah.
Jenny, I think you have a question.
I see some hands right.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I think we touched on it a little bit with Steve's question, but I was curious. So first of all, this is awesome. It's just, yeah, I'll reiterate what Kathy says. It's exciting to see this such great progress. But I was wondering about the checklist. Looks great. So I was wondering what you're going to do with the checklist. So are you going to hand the checklist over to the park and then let them decide how to address the gaps? Or are you going to come up with a set of recommendations and then how to kind of broker those recommendations? And then the other thing is it's probably not an issue, but I can, maybe this is just me being conservative, but thinking about these products and being concerned about endorsing products that we don't know necessarily the efficacy or the safety. And I'm sure they obviously have to meet all of these particular standards and things like that. But, we've come across them, and so we'll offer them as potential solutions, but it's a bit heavy because it's coming from a set of academics and maybe kind of offered to Parks Canada. So just the endorsement piece of selecting what it is that you're going to recommend. These are just, I don't expect you to have answers to these questions. It's just thoughts that pop into my head.
Yeah, I had the same concern, Jenny, that we don't want to look like we're, selling, becoming salespeople for these products. Definitely. I think it's more if there are users out, these product manufacturers have user groups that, can offer firsthand experience, testimonials of how these things help them. If we collect some of those stories and show them to Parks Canada, it may link. It may say people at Parks Canada may say, "Hey, this is a product we might want to find a way to facilitate our other users." Our visitors gaining access to these pieces of equipment, if there's enough of them, if it makes sense, if there's so many questions. But right now it just feels like there's so many of these products out there, so disparate. No one knows about anything that's out there. Right now we're just trying to what's out there, put it all into a table so that at least people can see what's available at the current stage. Yeah. I see Kathy has her hand up.
This also kind of follows, but is a little different. So this is a list of equipment. It's maybe got some environmental modifications, but what about training? So especially these days, I think so many people have had introduced the expectation that people have training in inclusion and diversity and accessibility. And, that's a positive from the last year with COVID and other social issues. But maybe the brokering between, the academic technical materials and, some summer student who's working, taking admissions to parks, are they going to have some training? So is that part of this project, is to, here's a one-day course to train parks staff about what this all means and how to advise people? Or are there going to be experts cultivated within the park staff who are the accessibility go-to people? So what about the training side, the personnel side?
Absolutely. So we had a really great conversation with someone from the National Center on Accessibility down in the US, and they have a couple of different training programs where they train, I think they called them accessibility coordinators, who are local park staff at each of the parks. So they have a similar issue in the US, that very sort of siloed park system. So they have a few different training programs, and they are going to provide us with access to one of them to start with, and then potentially the other one as well. So we're going to take their training programs and see what we can learn from that, and definitely that will probably be incorporated into the recommendations to Parks Canada.
You're absolutely right, Kathy. This is something that is coming. We keep hearing that, someone, for instance, if someone is to call in, like some of the individuals we are in contact with who have kids with disabilities that need a lift and a change table at the site they're going to visit, right? So for them to call that, you can imagine a family like this, before they set out, they would call in to the park and ask, do you have an accessible bathroom? But really what they need to know is, do they have a lift and a change table that can support the particular person's need, right? So the person at the front desk, even if they know that there might be an accessible bathroom, if they don't know the detail down to the level that this user needs specifically, it's not helpful, right? They won't make that trip unless they get an answer. So that information probably needs to be, not only the person answering the phone not only needs to be trained, but probably the website needs to include that information so that people can find it readily. Mark and I were talking a little bit about this stuff and with Allison and trying to think about whether there's sort of this minimal set, what did we call it? The metadata. I think we had this term that Mark and I were throwing around, like a set of information that needs to be commonly known and understood about what's available, what are all the features, what are all the needs that people, if someone calls and says they have this particular impairment, what are the things that they're likely to need to know about in order to make their trip worthwhile. And you're right that's not a small task, but that's definitely a piece of it. Yeah, so we'll have to think about how we incorporate that into, you're right, that's not really in the matrix in any form currently, but maybe it goes under a heading of training. Maybe that
I think, is there personnel there to help? That could be something. And I could imagine, organizing a form so that people, can check off things that they have issues about, so that it's not just a totally open call, that there's a little bit of structure. And I'm also thinking, Walter kind of mentioned, I think, the interface with professionals. So if I'm an audiologist and I have a client with a hearing loss and they're worried about going to a park, if I know who to call on the inside, then I could say, I have this person, what they need is an X. Do you have that? If they bring this, can we do that? Like there's some negotiation where sometimes it might be the individual, but sometimes it might be their clinician who knows, how to zero in on what is actually needed. And I personally think audiologists would be very receptive to that. And going forward, if every audiologist had a little thing about, is how people with hearing loss can enjoy parks, they would be handing that out. And then every person who ever came to them could have access to that information.
That's fantastic. Sorry, go ahead.
Two of the professions that will be all over this is physiotherapists, because that makes intuitive sense. And the other one is orientation and mobility specialists, because they would be involved in actually training people to do this independently. But if they can be involved in the actual development of the space and the resources, they will go for that.
I know you're doing this work for Parks Canada, but I could imagine when it's all done for Parks Canada that it will not be a difficult step to generalize this to provincial parks or to city parks, because some of the issues are going to be the same. So
You're exactly right. Yeah, that is the goal, is to kind of, all of the things that we learn is to present it in a way that it's generalized. Yeah.
Amazing.
Being mindful of the time, are there any more kind of questions or comments, conversations? As to like that, I think we'll hold these meetings as needed, sort of as we have any major updates and things. We'll kind of host another meeting to share.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us, everybody, and for your feedback. Well, yeah, please do, if you think of anything else after the fact, please do send me an email. Great.
Did you make any connections with the age-friendly people?
Do we have, I don't know, we have a list of contacts that we have to still make. I'll check to see if that one, Wakas or Allison, do you recall if you'd reached out to the age-friendly groups? Doesn't sound familiar.
No.
But why don't you follow up with me
sure.
when the time is right?
Sure, will do. Yeah, thanks very much. Great. Take care, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Allison.
Thank you.
Okay,
Bye.
Bye.